Okay, so welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. Julian Ayres, as in airs and graces, as you
There's some
just
grace.
pointed out. Yeah, first mistake is getting someone's pronouncing somebody's name wrong, or yeah, I've done that a few times on podcasts. So never got that right. So we're off to a good start. So here we are again. Jules, because we tried to do this podcast before, didn't we? We tried to record this months ago, and the weather, the weather, it was that period before the end of the year where it just rained constantly, and it was like torrential rain and horrendous wind. And my internet that week was just wasn't great, so we recorded, but we kept stopping and coming back on again. And in the end, we decided to ditch it and just leave it for a fair weather day. And the scheduling and me being um, not good at scheduling and the spine race and everything in between means that we're finally here in February when it was December when we spoke before. So, how have you been in the interim?
Yeah, really good. It's like I said, I the Challenger South when you were doing the full. So the last few weeks has just been building back up into proper training now. So I had my last full big week was last week, and that was quite horrific. It was you forget how hard big week trainings are because I've only done like some small sessions in the build up, and then I think this morning I woke up and went, yeah, I think I'm gonna have this evening off. I'm gonna look forward to that, and I ran out of shoes. I've got 5 pairs of trail shoes which are just slowly drying, and I was like, okay, that's an excuse or a sign. I'll take that.
Did you have 5 pairs of shoes for the race?
No. I just had the one, but at home, I'll wear a pair. They'll get absolutely muddy, and I'll just keep going until I'm all out of shoes. And hopefully, the first pair's dried, but it's not. It's soaking up here as well. So where we're based.
Yeah, it's gone wet again, hasn't it? Well, there was a bit of sun today, and there was a really nice sunset I noticed earlier. But we're not here to talk about sunsets. And also we're not here to talk too much about the spine because I know everyone keeps saying, "Okay, the spine's over now, time to move on." But as if to be mocking me, you've actually turned up for the viewers of the podcast actually wearing your spine hoodie.
It
So
wasn't on purpose. It was. We did say this before. It was literally. I've been working from home today, so it's like, what's the comfy, warm thing to put on? There you go. So there was no. My planning is not that good. I plan clothes for a podcast.
Some people do. Some people do. I just find any old t-shirt and that's clean and put it on. But obviously, yeah, we will. Unfortunately, if you're hoping that this is going to be a spine-free podcast, people watching and listening, then I'm sorry you're out of luck. So we are going to be touching on stuff to do with the spine because of the subject matter.
And a little bit
So
of Dragon's Back because I'm trying to
yes,
egg
yeah,
you onto that.
we can go a bit more dragons back as well. So a bit of context then. So we met on so it was the summer race, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
2023. I had done Challenge North, and I was pretending to help out the media team. Sorry, well, I was helping the media team by doing bits of filming and stuff. And so you'd done the full summer spine
Yeah.
and in June. So we met at the end of that. We had a conversation about birds and the mocking those. Well, they're not mocking birds, but they feel like they're mocking you, don't they? Those birds up on the moors that just like attack, like swoop and attack you,
Yeah.
or just
The
make that.
dive bombing birds.
Did we find out what they were? What birds they were?
I think I found out, but you know what? I've no idea what it is now. I just remember it as this. It was the same bird the whole way. I'm pretty sure of it. It was just chasing me.
Yeah, hallucinations get you like that, don't they? Yeah.
It
One
was it
bird.
was it was interesting when you said about yours. You saw the bear, and I think you know what? I saw the same tree stump as well, but I didn't see a bear. I saw some sort of hoodlum or something who's going to attack me. So it's the
Well,
same one.
I was talking to Nikki Spinks. I interviewed Nikki Spinks after her race, and she kind of like dismissed the the hallucinations, and I was a bit disappointed because she was just like, well, my logic brain kicks in, and I know that it's not real, so that's the end of it. I'm like, well, that spoils all the fun. I obviously and I said, I've got a logical brain. I'm a man. I'm a problem solver, and my logic told me that those shapes, obviously, it wasn't a bear. It looked like a bear, but I knew it wasn't a bear. But I let my mind sort of play
Yeah,
along with it.
I
And
think
that's what she said. She was just like, I think if you're open to hallucinations and you let them happen, they will happen and happen more frequently. But if you sort of shut them down, then they don't affect you.
that's experience for you though. She's just better than us, So we're still kind of we're amateurs in her world of all the things that she's achieved. So one day we'll get to the stage where we don't see bears and vandals
Or
in the
hear
woods.
or hear one singular bird chasing you for
One
260
singular bird.
miles. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So, Jules, the reason we're talking then today is we got chatting about the race and everything, and I didn't realize that you were doing the race and other races that you've done or other ultras you've done, was all part of this research that you were carrying out to do with resilience. So, for the listener and the viewer, could you sort of give us a rundown of your background, and how you came to do what you do for work, and how it relates to the sport of ultra running, and what you're sort of trying to achieve with this research that you've done?
Yeah, of course. So I got into running initially in about 2012. I enjoyed fitness. I played a lot of football, but my years at university, I didn't really follow a very healthy lifestyle. And in 2012, I remember I was playing like five-a-side football, and I kind of died on my backside after about 10 minutes. And I went, right, this is a sign I need to get a little bit healthier. So started going to the gym, started actually enjoying going out running, and we did. My wife and I did our first half marathon back in 2012 down in Brighton. And straight away, I kind of got this bug. I was like, oh, John, I quite enjoy this group of people going out. And, my nature is I'm a very addictive. If I find something I enjoy, I'm just going to keep going and going and going. So, really got into road racing. And then it was a friend of mine who is a race director. He said, well, we've got this 46 miler. You should totally get involved with it. And I just thought, I've done a marathon. It's not that much more difficult, is it really? It's still running up in a straight line, left foot, right foot. And how did I get on? Well, I finished. It wasn't pretty, but there's something grabbed me about it. The very difference from road racing, the challenge of it. One, it was just the scenery. We were running, this race was called Run to the Castle. It's from Abu Dhabi up to Harlech, point to point along the Welsh coastal path. And just the very different nature of not just the race itself, but the people I was running with. They weren't there was no competitive, angry vibe, which I found sometimes with road racing, which kind of started to put me off road racing. Um, the thing as well I found was I got so focused on position and time, I lost sight as to the reason as to why I was running or what I was doing. And what I found was that, I go to different races and I can't remember anything about them. I'm focused so much on the tarmac in front of me and a mile marker. I'm so focused on the finish, I forget sight of the whole journey. So I'd say around 2017, 2018, I made this kind of change. I went, right, well, I'm ditching road racing. If I do road racing, I'm going to do it for a bit of fun, bit of enjoyment, a bit of kind of accountability to keep up and make sure I keep with the hard work and stuff. But I'm just going to focus purely on doing ultras. And the more I got into the scene and more I started to learn about it, and actually had lots of failures and DNFs along the way, um, it started to it linked in quite a lot with the things I was doing in my work. Now, my work is I'm a senior lecturer up at Wrexham University. I work in education, and a big part of my job is training teachers. And we have a big issue, not just in the education sector, but with my student teachers as well, with retention and attrition rates. We have numbers of really high the engaged, committed people who want to make a difference in the role of teaching, but either they drop out midway for a program or they go into the role. And then I hear so many of them go, oh, how did you get on? Oh, I quit after 6 months, or I quit after 7 months in the job. And when you talk to them about why they quit, it's never really about losing, I don't want to be a teacher. It's just all the other stuff that comes with it. So it made me start to think a lot more about my own interests, which is motivation. What makes us do the things that we want to do? What gets us up in the morning, even though we have adversity and we have challenges and we have different elements like this that are problematic. What is it that makes somebody go through? And I kind of looked at the idea of training to be a teacher like training to do an ultra, because in both working in education, both doing a run, you have challenges, you have things to overcome, this need for reflection, this need to learn from previous mistakes. And it was through my own running experiences that I started to put together what I call like my pillars of resilience, which is what my PhD is focused on. So the aim is I've now got out there. There's a module which I teach to my students, and actually all of the sports students at the university now do my resilience module, and it's all based on the foundation of ultra running and the lessons I've learned through ultra running. And I think that's where we got chatting was we were kind of, I don't know, may have been just my confusion at the end of a rather large run where I was like, oh yeah, it helped me because of that. But that's really where I'm coming from. It's been an interesting journey though.
Mm. It's interesting that you mentioned that race. Race to the, is it run to the castle or race to the castle?
Run to the castle.
Yeah. Is that the one where it's the people call it run to the transit van in front of the castle? Because you don't actually run to the castle, do you?
No, just you run to the school car park. He does say though, I have done it once where if you wanted to, you can actually run up to Harlech Castle. And I was feeling a bit arrogant. So I was like, yeah, I'll run up to the castle, and I regretted it straight away because it's really steep.
Really steep.
There's always one.
Yeah.
There's always one.
No, I didn't bother. So I did it. I'm trying to think of the year that I did it. I think it was still during lockdown, and I think it was a bit more strict there. And then do you do the thing where you park at the finish and then get the train down to the start?
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? That may have been the 1 year when I've not done it, because I've done it. Oh, I think I've done it 8 or 9 times because Denzel does it 2 times a year.
Denzel, that's it, yeah.
It's a fantastic rate. I always do rate it to people if they're looking for an entry level ultra to get into, which has still got an element of challenge to it, and it's not just 20 laps around a school field. Totally go and do it. It's stunning. But yeah, you do just finish at a transit van. And it goes back to how I got into ultra running. Was I think again that was the thing I loved about it. It was just the simplistic nature of it. You turned up, got a number. It's a bit like if you look at fail racing and stuff. You turn up, pay your money, run up there. This one was just a bit longer. Just keep following the Welsh Coastal Path sign.
Do you think that there's any correlation between the relaxed sort of attitude of trail running and ultras like Lowkey Ultras in the UK, and sort of how you, not how you approach them, but how it's sort of related to your area of expertise? Do you think with a low key race, there's less pressure to perform, and that affects your endurance and your sort of resilience of the race? Or have you done any sort of correlations between that?
It's a weird one. I think, and I've got to be careful because I'm only basing it off opinion. There's a reason why. I think it was at the running show, the increase in the number of trail running tents and companies that were organizing up there. And I think trail running, by its nature, is quite a collaborative event. And where I found with road running, again, it's just from my opinion, road running was very you against everybody else. And I'm not saying this for everybody, but when I was at the top of my game with road running, I always called it angry running, because you wanted to beat the person next to you. And yes, I think in ultra and in trail running, you still have that sort of race mentality. The top boys and girls will always want to win, but I do think there is a different, there's more of a camaraderie. And again, I think it was that whole feature of when I was first got into ultra running, I went into it with a road racing mentality, and I felt really isolated and I didn't like it. And I was finishing, and then I was seeing all these groups of people come through the finish line just having a laugh.
Mm.
And the fact that no one really cares who wins or loses in an ultra. It sounds weird. No one goes, "What position did you come?" They always go like, "Oh, how many pork pies did you eat, or how many miles did you do, or what weird things did you see?" Not what. How many people have said to you, Sam, "Oh, what was your position and what was your time?"
Yeah,
They
no,
don't.
yeah, it doesn't correlate, does it? With I saw something on someone just put like a reel on Instagram, and it was like a guy running down a bit of single track trail saying, and I think the caption was something to do with like a five. Do what is the average 5K time for a trail runner, and it was no one knows because
No.
no one really cares. That's the thing about trail running. No one's 5K is 5K. It could be just 5K in 100K, something like that, and it doesn't really make any odds, does
Yeah.
it? So
It's
the mentality is different, isn't it?
it's quite funny, but my first abroad ultra was the Transylvania 100 back in 2016, I think 2017 or something, and it was the first time I'd really done like a big ultra abroad, and I kind of I thought it was gonna be like the Welsh Coastal Path, and I remember just the first climb, and I was like looking at my watch, and I was like, it's taken me like 45 minutes to do a mile. What is going on here? And like I said to my wife, I was like, oh, I think I'll be done in 9, 10 hours. I think I was like 16, 17 hours. She was already preparing to like call my dad and be like, yeah, sorry, he's not made it home. It's we're gonna have to leave him somewhere in the middle of Romania. And but it is that I think that's it. I think when you throw out time and position out the window, you get back to the roots of what running is about, whether it's for physical growth, whether it's for mental growth or personal challenge, or I think there's the hierarchy of what's important. It places more emphasis on that than opposed to purely time.
Mm.
Not saying that time is of importance. Like everyone's been looking at Jack Scott's time,
Mm.
and that's incredible, absolutely incredible. But I think just finishing is still absolutely incredible, regardless. And I think the community does understand that, and that's something that's really important there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thinking about your comparison that you've sort of made between road running and trail runners, then who in your line of sort of this research that you've been doing into resilience, who can you say for sure who is more resilient, a trail runner or a road runner? Is that the sort of thing that you've been looking at, or is that not really apply?
No, it's all about with my research. When I looked at what makes somebody resilient, it was all about you can have a highly resilient road runner. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's about there's fundamental features, and the people at the top of the game will have certain aspects regardless of whether they're doing a road or trail, and the people who make progress will utilize certain ideas and methodologies and certain approaches, and the fundamental aim of it all is this whole idea of self-awareness. That's the biggest part of resilience, is this idea at the heart of resilience is, and I think I sent it to you, I said know thyself is at
Yeah.
the absolute center of resilience. Highly resilient individuals are those who have a high level of true self-awareness. Now we have to be careful because there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I think I banged on last time. That's people who are overly confident in beliefs that they perceive themselves to have but don't. Always think of like David Brent from The Office, the epitome of Dunning-Kruger effect. But the top runners will have a high level of self-awareness as to what their strengths are, what their limitations are, where they're going, what their aspirations are, and it's all about control. So when I first made the move from road running to ultra, I remember, I think I spoke to you last time about it. I did a series of races up in Yorkshire, and it's called the White Rose 100. And it was my first attempt at a 100 miler. So I'd come from doing 40 milers, and I got a bit, you know, you know, big headed and went, oh, I'm going to go do a 100-miler now. Never really progressed past 50. I just thought I'd make this jump because I had this idea in my head of I can do that. And it's great to have confidence to do it. But I remember I went into it and I think I bailed at about mile 47. So I thought, right, I'm going to go back the next year and I'm going to do it again. So I went back the next year, bailed about mile 63, 64. So guess what I did? I went back again and I thought, right, I'm going to do it again. And did I finish? No, no. Mile 87. Mile 87.
So close.
I know. Yeah, but that 13 miles just seemed like so far, so far. But I remember every single time, you know, I was talking to somebody after I did the 87, and it all went Pete Tong. And he said to me, he said, oh, how much training do you do? So I was like, oh, I'm in the gym, I do the swim, I do the bike, I do this amount of mileage, this amount of elevation. And he was like, yeah, but how much do you train your mind? And I thought he was getting a little bit too hippie for my liking. So I lived near Glastonbury growing up, so I was quite used to these sorts of people. And I just remember thinking, no, I'm not going to train my mind. But I went away, read up a bit on it because I thought, I've got to read into this. And I didn't do any. I didn't really do anything to do with learning about myself, learning about my real limitations, my real strengths, or using these different features that I've written about. And I remember one of the big things I did, the big change, I went, all right, you're not ready for a 100-miler yet. And I think that was it was a bit of self-realization that I tried to bite off more than I could chew.
Mm.
So I did go back to the White Rose. Did I do the 100? No, I went and did the 60-mile race, and I think I won that one. Because what I had done, I had realized, I had a great self-awareness to go, you're not ready there yet. One day you will be, but at the moment, realize what your capability is. And when we talk about self-awareness, it's not even just terms of running. Self-awareness is also knowing about who you are as a person. I work 5 days a week. I probably work about 60, 70 hours a week.
Wow.
I've got family who, you know, I want to spend time with. I've got other hobbies and bits and pieces. I'm not a full-time professional athlete. I can get a certain amount of mileage in per week without ruining the other elements of my life or going into work absolutely dying on my backside. So I have to have this self-realization that you're not going to be getting 100-mile weeks in, 120 miles a week in without compromising other elements that you enjoy. So with what you can do and your work commitments and all these other things, at the moment, you're not ready for that big jump. And I think that's a big part of resilient characters are those who are they're committed, but they do it within a framework that is realistic to them. And I think sometimes, because what I was doing every time I was going out and I was DNFing, because I think one of the things I said to you was there's an issue of grit and there's an issue of resilience. But people would say, "Oh, it's great that you're going back and you're giving it another go." But I was going back without making any improvements or learning any lessons. Really, I was focused on the wrong path, and all I was doing every time I was going back and I was DNFing was I was just going down this negative cycle of lack of self belief, lack of self confidence. Going because I'd always make. I'm not sure. You could be honest. Maybe other people who are listening will say it. But every time I'd be like, oh yeah, my back went, my knee went, oh yeah, it's definitely a dodgy. It wasn't. Every single time I DNF'd, it was my head that went. And I still remember now at mile 87, I was sat on the side of the road. It was November in the middle of Yorkshire, and I was just being like, and I remember sat there thinking, I'll just say to people it was my knee that hurt because there was this fear potentially that people would look down on me because they'd be like, oh, he can't even do that. And I don't know, but that was all self-perpetuated by me and because I had this, I didn't know enough about people. I hadn't thought enough about people. And, you know, I'd think that people would think negative of me. And that's why I'd make up, oh yeah, I've definitely hurt my knee. And it was rubbish because those people would be like, they don't think like that. The friends I have are wonderful people and they would not think that way. And it is quite a thing that we have to be careful of. because you do get into that negative cycle, and it can really batter you up. And that's one of the big things I work with my student teachers, is the importance of your collaborative circle, getting the right people around you and sharing honestly and openly. Because I think if I'd earlier, after that first DNF, I had openly and honestly shared with people and went, God, no, my head just really went. I really struggle with this. I could have maybe got some much better support rather than people just go, oh, go see a physio, go do this. But I could have got real open support. And this again, it's that next level of what makes a resilient person. A resilient person is willing to be open and honest and share with other people. There is a big issue, unfortunately, a lot with stoic machismo, where we don't express our emotions or feelings. Now, I'm not saying to people, oh, you have to cry and hug people. Can if you want, that's absolutely fantastic. But being open and honest, and the people that I train with, I'm very lucky. We will be absolutely 100% honest and open with each other. If we're out, John and I, John Shield, you've recorded a podcast with him. We're out training pre-spine, and we're the sorts of, I think there's only me and a couple of other people I know will be like, oh, do you want to go do 30 miles in the rain in the bog? And he'll be like, yeah, let's go for it. And we were out up in Llangollen, and it was just horrific weather, soaking wet through. I was miserable. And sometimes it can be that whole stoic machismo going, we'll just grind it through. Even though I knew I was probably going to get unwell later on, be miserable, not enjoy it. But we've got a very open thing where I'll just turn and go, I'm going back to the van. This is crap. I'm not enjoying it. And Joe, I said that to him. He went, oh, yeah, we're going to the finish anyway. We're going to finish here. I was like, oh, thank God. And but we'll do vice versa. So he's coming back from injury at the moment. We did a run, got to a bit. I said, do you want to go here, make it an extra 10 miles, or just want to go back? And he was like, yeah, let's go back. And there's no, puff your chest up and be, and that's the key thing I always think, especially with regards to resilience, is that open and honest element of it. Sorry, I've waffled on quite a lot there.
Good. No, it's good. No, I was just while you were talking, I was just thinking about what you said about your experience with the White Rose. That like really shocked me. The fact that you could get to like mile, was it get to mile 80, 87?
87 was the furthest I got.
87, but then the following year you went back and you won the 100K. So
yeah.
So what happened in that? That's the bit I can't quite fathom, is that you're clearly a really good ultra runner, good enough to win 100K. How come, what was missing from that previous year of DNFing and trying to find a reason to DNF in your head?
Well, this is good. This is this is the other element of what makes a resilient person. The issue when I started to really reflect and look at that race in particular, what I was doing every time, again, because of, potentially my own arrogance with it, I hadn't recce'd any of it. In fact, I'd never really been to Yorkshire. I just assumed that Wales and where I train, that's the same as Yorkshire, and again, it comes back from that road running. You go to a road race, it's the same everywhere you go, pretty much. It's a road. Yeah. And they'll go, oh, it's hilly. So that means it's got 300 foot over 26 miles. I'm going to get into a bad thing with the road running community now. I apologize.
No road runners listen to this podcast. It's fine.
Thank the Lord. So I did no recce's. I didn't know the area. I was literally driving up there. Now, I think in that realization, what I needed to do was, in a way, like close the chapter on it. I needed to shut the door. And I could have gone back and done 100. I knew at that time I was really busy with work. I wasn't going to get the training into a 100-miler. And what I actually did instead was I went and did, there was a race called the Liverpool to Manchester Double, which is a 100-mile. It's flat as a pancake. And I thought, just get that done. Tick it off. Get a 100-miler under your belt first. Then you can go and do the more adventurous, more difficult ones. Find your foundation. And I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll do that, do the 100K, just to go, it's done, because I knew I could finish it. I knew I could get it done. And what it would do is it would just allow me then also to use it as a recce opportunity. And you know, at that time, I wasn't. I wouldn't say I was like in 100% of the best mindset. So it was just perfect. I could go. I was in my happy zone. I like 40 to 50. I love 100Ks. I think they're a fantastic distance because you can still run them quite hard. But yeah, it was just close the book. I've not been back since. Maybe next year. Maybe next year. So
Add it to the list. Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting. It's interesting how you.
I do have a redemption list actually. It's all the races I've DNF'd in. I do have a redemption list of races I need to go back and take down. So it's always good fun.
Awesome. These pillars then that you speak about, the pillars of resilience then. So you've spoke about know thyself and obviously the importance of knowing your limits and everything like that, and knowing what your your good qualities are and your strengths and your weaknesses and everything, and being realistic about it. So what's the eat the horse part of part of it?
Right. Eat the horse is a couple of things really. So that came up. That one is it's the old adage of how does one eat a horse, and it's one bite at a time. And what happens a lot of the time, I found it in both the people I'm working with, trained to be teachers, and ultra running as well, is that sometimes we can see a challenge as just a giant horse. You know, my guys, when I'm training them to be teachers, are literally just seeing at the end of the seeing graduate as a teacher. And it's a bit like when you're going into any race, you've got to break it into the smaller parts, the smaller, what I call, can you hit it with a stick target, which is the manageable bite-sized chunks. Now, if we look at another race, I did Dragons back in 22, and I think it was the first time I'd really started to put everything into practice ready for it. And I remember I planned this route to do from Conway down to Llynogwen, over Trivan, into Peñol, over into Pass. And it was only about 21 miles or something like that. And I remember I went out and I got to Llynogwen, which is about 16 miles, and I was dying. Now, I'm not. It's a toughie section. It was roasting hot, and I just suddenly just gone like, oh my days! If I can't even do this 16 miles, how am I going to get all the way down to Cardiff? And it was straight away. It was like a snap moment. Going, well, you're not running to Cardiff. Your challenge is to run to the base camp at the bottom of Snowdon, and then the next chunk comes along.
Mm.
And you know, again, that gave me a good opportunity to do a lot of self-reflection. I kind of looked at what my gear was I prepared for it? I hadn't done any real mountain training. So actually I then went and did a lot of fell running, a lot of fell racing. I did the Shropshire Fell Race series. But the thing with eating the horse is also about when we tackle a problem, it's easier if we can do it into bite-sized, smaller chunks. I'm not sure if you found it with spine, but I always found it. I never saw it as a 260-mile race.
Mm.
At first, I saw it as a run to a checkpoint. So I broke it down into 50-mile chunks. So that's all I saw it as. And then as the race got harder, I started to then break it into smaller, manageable chunks. Those 50-mile checkpoints became 10-mile chunks. And then when it got really, really difficult, I turned it into park runs. So it'd be like, oh, it's only like 5 park runs. And I'd just start to envisage like a local park run that I've done. I'd be like, oh, I found that a doddle. Then I went and got, you know, so it's that positive mindset of once you start to break it down to smaller pieces, don't try to eat the whole cake. Challenges become a lot easier to overcome. And it's also, it gives you a great opportunity to really track your progress. And that one came about from when I was training for Dragon's Back. And I remember watching a few of the videos on it and people were doing it. And it was very much, it's not a race to Cardiff. It's a race to the end of the day. And then even then, I think I said to myself, right, it's 20 miles before lunch, 20 miles after lunch. And for some reason, I just went, it's a doddle. I'm not sure why it's problematic. It's really quite easy if you think of it in that, you know, so it just became a race to eat chips at the end of the day. And I know it's not a doddle, the race. I'm not making out to that it is, but having that instant mindset, I was in such a happier place. And I think I said to the race director after, I said that was the easiest, toughest race I've ever done, because I just started to put everything to action, and I just saw it every day as a fresh day to wake up and attack a problem. I think if you look at it too much as a big thing, you never see light at the end of the tunnel,
Mm.
and you get those little wins along the way, which is really nice.
That's true, actually. Yeah, the way you sort of describe the spine race. So, and I remember sort of in my early years of ultra running, just sort of hearing about the spine race from a friend, and I had the same reaction that most people have when you tell them it's like 268 miles of the Pennine Way, like, and everything that is in between. um, and your brain can't quite sort of fathom. And this, you find this, don't you, when you tell people that you've done it and that that aren't runners, and they kind of try and process like what it would be like to run 268 miles. And that's how it always seemed to me at first, until I sort of ventured into that world, volunteered on the race, then did the sprint, then did Challenger North, and realized that it is just like a race of so many halves. It's just, you can, naturally the race breaks itself up into chunks, because the focus always becomes the next checkpoint, doesn't it? That
Yeah,
when you set off, there's always, and even in between, you've got all of the, like, the mini checkpoints, the one that the ones that like the safety team are there come to see you, and that it almost feels like that's, they get offer you a drink, a cup of tea, and that becomes a mini checkpoint to get to. That there's going to be somebody you get to Hornistead Farm, and it's only like five. What is it? 5 miles from Bellingham? Is it
yeah,
5 miles from Bellingham? And really, you should just push on, shouldn't you? And just, it's only 5 miles, you should push on
mm,
to the end. But it becomes another thing to aim for during that
yes.
race. So do you think that, as part of like resilience for ultra running, for big races, if a race isn't broken up like that into sort of stages, that do you feel that that is like a strategy that ultra runners should sort of apply, to break it into those stages to make it doable?
100%. Because it's, again, going back to that, the idea of know thyself. That's all about self control, and in a way, it gives you control over the race. It's, again, people be like, what? It's a bit freaky. It's not hippie-ish, but I suddenly had control of my race then, because I knew that um, it was kind of, I could like envisage the run I was doing was maybe a run I'd do around home, and I'd be like, oh, it's just like this, it's just like this, and I was in charge. And I think one of the things I put on that list was, I may not have put it on there, was the uncontrollables. I may have
No,
put it
that's
on.
that's next. Yeah, that's next
Oh,
on the
is that
list.
next? I can ping on, because and that's a big key thing, and breaking it down. And like you said, it's quite interesting. You said, well, I did the sprint, then I did the south, and then I did the north. You've done it the right way. Whereas, when I first got into ultra running, I went the whole machismo, let's go. Why didn't you just go straight to do the big one straight away? You've done it the right way of going, well, I'm going to do the sprint, get a taste, learn some lessons, get in, find out more, volunteer, again, more information. If you look at the guys who've won Dragon's Back or done really well at Dragon's Back or done really well at Spine, a lot of them have volunteered.
Mm.
A lot of them have, even if it's just handing out drinks or tea or waving people on, they've learned so much around them. And they've done it the right way, that small bite-sized chunks before you go on and take on the beast of, and that can be applied to any big race, really.
Mm.
And it's about being sensible.
Unless you're Jack Scott and you just turn up and come
Yeah,
second
just
on your first spine race, and the next one you'd win.
but I bet you more than, the thing is, if you look at his races that he did in previous to it, prior to it, he'd done that build up as well. And I think he comes from a lot of fell racing and that sort of background. So that was there. And he's got, I think the things, if you look at Jack, I've listened to his podcast he did with you a while ago, I think prior, years
Yeah,
ago.
for the first spine.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you listen to, and his is all about self awareness, his whole development as a person post The issue, the personal elements that he overcame, was all about knowing himself
Mm.
and being more self-aware and having control over his life. They're all the traits that are just starting to emerge, really.
Yeah, and I suppose he's an outlier as well, isn't he? So compared to your average. So do you think that is this something that we've sort of, are the pros sort of more naturally wired to this kind of thinking then, as far as resilience goes, or is this something that they've had to sit down and force themselves to do the way that we all should do?
I think there's a couple of things really. One of the big things I'll talk about is the idea of good runners or people who are successful in life are great collaborators. They have good communities around them. And I think one of the things, again, another thing I whacked on the list was the idea of cognitive diversity. And that all came about from there's a guy called Matthew Syed who writes about business management, business leadership. That's his background. But he looks at how we can actually improve through collaboration with other alternative thinkers. We don't naturally have to, being a good ultra runner, you could get advice from somebody who's a good footballer or not even sports person. I've got a lot of my advice from people who are economists and business leaders, and that's where I've stolen. My research as well is based on nursing in the armed forces. A lot of it is stolen from there. And I think if you look at the pros, they've got great people around them. Very rarely will you see a really high pro who is completely isolated and on their own. And the ones who are great, they're either part of a good local running community or they're part of a team that works together where they share advice, gear, information. How many of the top guys I saw this year, and they were like, oh, I borrowed a sleeping bag off Jim, or I borrowed it off somebody else, or I did recce's with this person, or they showed me a good part to be aware of. That's that idea of collaborating. The people who are effective are those who are willing to listen, share, take on board information, and it doesn't matter where that information's from, as long as it feeds what you're moving forward with. So, be ultra running isn't about being an individual, even though it's quite a lonely sport at times. The best ultra runners are those who are willing to collaborate, share, be a group, and that's a big change I found from road racing, where it became a little bit, the top elite guys started to be a little more isolated, as opposed to ultra running, where a lot of time it's, I've got a group of friends of mine, and we'll just go. Do you want to go do something stupid up in the mountains? And 6 or 7 of us will get together and go do something. So it's quite an important thing.
Yeah, that community. I've not really thought of that before. The way that ultra runners, yeah, we can be like lone wolves, can't we? With training and things like that, but we're all part of that bigger community. And so, do you think that's for somebody who's sort of listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, and who wants to get better as a more resilient ultra runner? If they're How would you sort of get them to go about this community side of things? And would you say sort of go and join a running club? So not all running clubs are kind of like trail friendly, are they? I know a lot of them are, but
I think that there's so many ways to get into it, and we can even just start, even if we just ignore the ultra running bit for a start, we look at the very, very roots of it. And I always think back to, I love park run. I'm not sure if you do park run yourself, but I used to, and again, I hold my hand up, I used to kind of poo-poo the idea of park run. I'd be like, who wants to go and drive out and do a 5K? I used to have a rule which was how long it took me to do the race was the furthest I'd be willing to travel and drive somewhere. So a 5K would have to be on my doorstep for me to go out and do it. But a friend of mine, she got into park runs, and the difference it made for her confidence and who she was. And it wasn't even just the running. She'd be volunteering, she'd be cheering people over the line. You get such a wide variety. I was at Widnes Park Run at the weekend, and there was just such a wide variety of people there from all backgrounds. I love seeing people's running shirts, and you had people, someone had done Comrade, someone had done an Ultra, someone had done this. So you can even just start at that route one of just going to a park run, and more than likely there'll be somebody there who's got some sort of trail or ultra running shirt. Fail racing, your local fail racing scene is just a superb way again to meet like-minded people. A lot of the time, fell races, there's sometimes a little bit of a stigma attached where if people think you've got to be a mountain goat to go and do a fell race. Absolute tosh, to put it politely. You know, you go along to fell races, they're categorized by your age. You'll see people of all backgrounds. You'll see club runners, you'll see non-club runners. You'll see people who are walking it, and you'll see people who are smashing it up the thing. It's like a fiver a race. You turn up on a Wednesday night somewhere, and it's like literally go run up that hill and back down. But then everyone goes and gets a meal afterwards, they have a chat. And also those races, they'll normally have like, oh, well, there's a group of us going to go do a recce or somewhere else, we're going to do a longer route. And, you know, like I said, preparation for Dragon's Back, I went and did the entire Shropshire Fell Race series. So I was like, I need to get better at running up hills and running down them. Terrible at running down, I'm not that fast. And I met so many great people and watched them how they did it, and they gave me advice and they gave me tips. And I think I was very, even though I had a good background of running, I was quite willing to go, I need to learn more. I was like a sponge of information. I was watching people who were, you know, 20, 30 years older than me. One, they were absolutely smashing me past there, wearing their PE kit from the 1970s. But it was just it was a great thing, kind of like a bit of humility in a way to realize you've still got loads to learn. You're still an absolute newbie in this. So, you know, that's one way. There's another way. The great thing with social media, if there is a positive of it, is how many more opportunities is open for us. And don't be afraid to put on there, anyone fancy going for a run somewhere? I'm going to be, I remember in preparation for Spine, how many people I saw, we're doing a recce from here to here if you want to get a lift. It's a very inclusive and welcoming group of people. So embrace it. There's no egos, hopefully. That's the main thing.
Yeah, just try it out. So these other pillars then, remove the stigma. What's this all about?
The stigma, again, it kind of goes a little bit back to lone wolf. So if we think of it from my education perspective, I had a lot of issues where students would, they thought that when they did an assignment or anything like that, or they were writing a lesson plan, do it on your own. I'm the one who's going to be a teacher by the end of it. I'm going to do it completely on my own. What would happen is, again, it goes back to when I first DNF'd was, I was trying to do everything on my own, and I was going into this negative cycle. One of the limitations of self-reflection is if you're self-reflecting from a negative space, you're actually only going to get worse. It's very difficult to get yourself out of a hole on your own. You know, you can't just turn around. If you're looking from a clinical sense, people with depression, you can't just turn around and go, oh, I feel better today. Doesn't happen like that. It really doesn't. So anyone who thinks it does, you're wrong. Sorry. So it's the same with ultra running. Is this whole idea, the stigma of you to be good, you have to be, you know, on your own, the lone wolf, and the stigma of trying to be better than everybody else. And actually, the group achieves because of that. If we again look straight at the start of the Spine, what did you have? You had a fantastic train of the top runners. So many people who I saw running in pairs and running in groups and willing to share. And yes, somebody will run off and they will take the lead, and that's absolutely fine. But that start line, all of them were just chilling together, getting in the rhythm, getting in the flow, and working together, as opposed to this feel that you have to be better than everybody else. And that's just with anything really. You know, progress comes through collaboration, as opposed to, and that's, there's a great book by a guy called Alfie Kohn called Against Competition. He looks at the issues of competitive mindsets, and it's all about how actually we achieve through working. You could look at the American politics system at the moment, and that's, there you go. If you want an analogy, if you want a perfect metaphor for it, just look at that, and that should hopefully I haven't got too many Americans who are going to shout at me. I'm just going to offend everybody today. That's the plan.
Yeah, amazing. Right, I'm going to keep referring to this list because it's great. The pillars of resilience. So First attempt in learning. So where does this come in?
So first attempt, like, it was one of those, when you see those really, it's a bit like a live, laugh, love sort of sign on a wall. And I saw one and it was about failure. First attempt in learning is fail. There's the old adage that it was Edison made a light bulb 999 times before he got it right.
Mm.
I'm not sure if that's correct, I'll be honest. I think they've slightly exacerbated, didn't make it 999 times, but it's embracing failure. And actually, every time I did DNF, I was seeing it as a negative. I was seeing it as a fail because of where I was at that moment in time and how I perceived other people would see it. I look back at it now, however, and actually go, God, I learned loads from that. I made vast improvements. That first day's training for Dragon's Back, like I said, I got down to Llyn Ogwen and I was wrecked. But because I was in this, I didn't see it as a negative. I kind of went, right, you need more water. So I got like a different bag. I got bigger hydration packs. Again, a bit of self-awareness. You can't do it with just, I was trying to do it with like 500 milliliters of water, thinking I want to be light and fast. And I went, no, don't be daft. You need 2 liters. And did that. And then I did day 2, which I think if you're going to go do dragons, day 2, recce to your heart's, it's hard. It's really difficult. But again, struggled on that one, but learned a lot from it. And it wasn't great. It wasn't pretty. I think John's got a great picture where I just look like, my face is so gaunt. I look like Skeletor, because it was just a horrific, haranguing day. But I learned a great deal from it. And I think sometimes when we do fall, we do think that is it. But actually, you've got to, it's this whole idea of flipping it and going, okay, what did I learn from those mistakes? And the progress I've made have not been always through success. The progress I've made moving forward as a runner or as an ultra runner, and I've done some great races, have been off the foundations of my failures. And I think it goes back to that's the excitement of ultra running. That's what makes it so interesting. I always found that I never failed in road racing. I never DNF. There was never a risk that I was going to DNF a road race, because even if I wasn't going to run very well, I could just plod it in, get through. So I never really learned as much as I have done as both a person and as a runner, as an athlete, and maybe as a friend to other people. I think I've definitely become a lot more empathetic and a lot more humanistic in my ultra running days, as opposed to road running, where I was a little bit individual, a lot more angry. I'm a lot more chilled now.
um, there's something you talked about angry running earlier, and there is something in that though, isn't there? With with like fast road running, that you can sort of make yourself. I'm not sure what music you're listening to, but I've got a bit of a penchant for metal, and always had as a as teenager. I was an angry teenager. But if I want to do like a fast 20 miler or something on the road, then music will be the thing that drives me. And I can't do that. All the fastest training runs I've ever done have always been to music. I could never manage to pull something out of the bag without that sort of motivation and the anger. But it's different with trail running, isn't it? That I
I was
don't
just going to say that.
I don't feel the need. I don't feel the need to. I do listen to music. I do listen to podcasts. As like just it's more entertainment than motivation. I think with the spine. I don't know about you, what your sort of preferences were, but I can enjoy the scenery, for hours and hours and hours. But there were times when I literally just put my headphones in and listened to a podcast about absolutely anything other than running, just
Yeah.
to sort of keep going.
It's quite funny you say that about the music, because I'm the same. My road running music is very angry. I can't even, some of the band names I can't even say because I don't think they'd pass your censorship. But yeah, very, but driving to work with Lamb of God on full blast sort of thing if I'm going to work. But then yeah, when I'm trail running, it's like post rock, and it's kind of ethereal sort of. It's not Enya, but it's close to Enya.
the feels.
Yeah, but it's true. It's weird. Spider. I had some music on for that. I did make the mistake that my Spotify. I've got a playlist of my dad's favorite music, and that came on, and it's an emotional run as it is anyway. Then that came on. I was like, oh, not a great spot, not a good playlist to have on at that time. So I had to quickly skip that one.
Is there any relation with music and resilience then? Is there anything connected there with being able to sort of be more resilient by listening to music during a run, or is that not connected at all?
Oh,
There is no research on
I
it.
I've not looked into it. Um, it's an interesting topic to look into. I think again it depends on how you perceive it. It just reminds me though that episode of Father Ted where Creep comes on and by Radiohead in the back of the bus. So maybe I don't. There is research, however, on the tempo and the time signature of music and how you walk.
Yeah.
So if you suddenly put like a waltz 3/4 on, you're going to trip over your own feet. So don't do that. Just listen to a nice 4/4, 80 BPM, and you'll be fine. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Amazing. So how did this research that you did, how does it practically play out then with your students? What on a day-to-day basis, how are you sort of bringing it into the classroom to make it practical for them?
So it's initially I've made changes now. There's something called the Duckworth Grit Questionnaire. So what I did was I gave it to a group of students, and this Duckworth's Grit Questionnaire identifies people that she perceives as having low grit. So basically, I gave it to a group of students, and I picked out of it 13 who I thought they're potentially going to struggle based on having a low grit score. And then every month I would meet with them and I would give them what I would call a critical self-reflection question. So one of the questions could be, when was the last time you failed? And what they do, they have to reflect on it through either writing or audio blog, or I had a couple of students who were artists and they drew or they painted about it, this failure. And then what they do is they'd come back in the room and I'd leave them to it. And I'd just let them to share as a group the topic. And I'd actually remove myself from it because there is an issue. If I sit in the room, I can't remember the correct terminology for it, but they're going to sit there and they're only going to say what they think they should
Yeah.
say. But what they'd find is they'd have a group of people, they'd be talking about a topic, and so many of them would go, I've had that as well. Oh yeah, oh God, I've had that struggle. And they've shared and they've discussed. Or I had a few times where people would go, have you tried this? I've had this and this has really helped me. So each month they get a different question, and I'd formulate the questions. So they start off at basis of self-awareness, and then they'd move towards collaboration, then they'd move towards goal setting. So the middle questions would be things such as who's the collaborator in your life, and you think about the person who's helped you most and how they've helped you and the strengths of that person. Again, that's identifying the things you have around you, the support systems, and the value of them. Because again, that's that whole idea of valuing people that you have. But then the final stage is all about, so what are you going to do about it moving forward? Um, and from this group, we had some great writing. We had the highest percentage of graduate success. I think I had 88% of them had a job within the first 3 months of leaving the course, and they're still in post now with the highest retention and attendance rate of the entire year. Of those who came on my grit study, 100% of them completed the course and are now qualified teachers. And even with the sports students I've got it with now, because with them I can bring in people like Eddie Howe and Pep Guardiola and different sporting heroes. They've also found it, and I had a wonderful guy, real big lad, muscle lad in the gym, and it takes a while, but I remember one of the questions was about the impact of social media. One of the things was, how has social media impacted your life? Something like that. And he openly, and it was a fantastic process, he turned around the whole group and went, I thought about using steroids before because I was afraid that I didn't look big enough or I didn't look buff enough. Now, this is a big, muscly lad in front of a group of about 60, 70 students, male and female, openly talking about his own issues with body dysmorphia. And he spoke to me afterwards. He said, "Joel, that felt fantastic. I felt like it was like the first time he'd been able to openly and honestly discuss something that had been problematic for him, and he knows of lots of other people." Um, and again, it's a whole thing about he's now made a positive step moving forward. And for other people as well, they're going to learn a huge amount that even a person like him, who's big, strong, physically able, is still fallible to elements that may impact someone's health or mental well-being. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and now I've just got to analyze the rest of the data because it just keeps coming in, coming in. So
That'll keep you busy for a while, will
yeah.
it? So what's the takeaway thing then for ultra runners? Well, if you could sort of, I know it's like a big subject. If there's sort of like one thing that us as runners that we can do to improve our resilience, I know obviously there's the pillars. There's a lot of different areas involved in it. But
Mm.
for sort of like a snapshot for somebody, if they're just watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, what's the thing that you would want them to take away from it about what they can do to improve their resilience in running?
Um, the key thing, it is quite difficult to wrap up.
Yeah.
They can read. I've got 100,000 words coming out soon. They can read that. The big thing is about control the controllables. And when I'm talking about the controllables, it's so often that we fall down based on things that are completely out of our control. And what you've got to look at is how do you make them? An example to make it really simple. When I was doing some training, I was out last week in Snowdonia, and I got angry at the wind. Okay, right. And I remember I was up this mountain section. And it was just hammering rain, and I was getting fuming, and I was getting just real whinging about the wind. And I kind of clicked in my head and went, "You can't control the wind. The wind is a natural process. So what can you control?" And I had a couple of things in my head straight away. Um, I can cut my run short and get back to the car and be safe because I'm not a heavy person. I was getting picked up and thrown by the wind. I'm only about 70 kilos, so it's not really that much for it to throw me. Um, in future, look at the weather and work out what the wind is going to be like. I hadn't once considered the weather. There was so many errors, and that was because, I wasn't looking at what can I control. If I'd done that, I could have maybe gone, don't take that day off. Maybe just do another local trail run, save it for another day. And it's the same when we're out racing, when we're doing ultra running. Always think about what you are in control of. If you're in control of it, you can change it, you can alter it. Whether it's who you are, your self awareness, um, or whether it's, oh, I'm really cold, pack more coats. You can control that. You can add another layer on. Um, if you're feeling really down, do I have a happy music playlist? I had a couple of people, mostly actually, it was probably just my wife on the phone, and I'd call her. And that's something I could control, where I could make that phone call, chat to her about dive bombing birds for God knows how long. And that perked me right up. And I put that together but I only could put that list of things together because I started to learn more about myself. Where do I struggle? I struggle when it gets cold. I struggle when it gets dark, and when I get lonely. They're the big things. So how can I control those? And those alone, not even just the gym stuff, not even the mileage or the training, those things about who I am and my personality and my well-being, I'm in charge of them. And you know, I've had a couple of DNFs. Don't get me wrong. I still last year I tried the brutal oneer and the Ring of Fire, and I know the reason why I didn't complete either of them. One was just bloody difficult. I put it out there, just really hard and horrible, and I just couldn't be asked. And then Ring of Fire, I was just poleaxed. I'd literally just come back from the spine. Then I did the Peak District 100, and then I thought, yeah, let's go do a 3-day running event. But even with that one, the Ring of Fire, that was because I hadn't read the form correctly, and I thought it was 1,000 foot of elevation, 3,000, and then 2,000, but it was in meters. So I went off like a steam train and died on my backside middle of day 2. But again, that's because I hadn't done enough work, hadn't done enough research. I hadn't controlled the setting as well as I could. But that's the main pull I take away from it is you know, what can you control? And if you can't control it, let's just leave it.
Try not to stress about it.
Yeah, find an alternative, seek support from others, use the collaboration, because I would have found that run I did last week in the wind. I think if I'd been out with a group of people, I don't think I'd have struggled in the wind for some reason.
Could have hid behind someone.
Yeah, definitely. I found a real big person. I need to get some real massive runners to go. But I think it was just then it would have become more of an adventure. Maybe it would have kind of been a fun. We would have laughed about it. It would have changed the whole dynamic. But it was me on my own up a mountain, miserable. So I just went home. Yeah, and then I was miserable about the driving. So
it's funny how you could do an identical run like from week to week, but the context changes. So like you with friends, I found this like with when my spine training, I'd like booked off every Friday of December, and I was absolutely resolute that every Friday was going to be a 20-mile minimum long run on terrain that would be spine like. So if I couldn't get in, if I couldn't get to the Pennine Way, then I would just go in somewhere in the Peak District and do 20 miles. And the first, I think the first one I went on, I messed it all up as far as like timing and everything. I'd not left enough time. I was supposed to be somewhere on the Friday night and I ran out of time, and I ended up only doing like 16 miles. And I was beating myself up about this 16-mile run that should have been a 20-mile run. And I got one head torch with me and it had gone dark early. It was fine because my head torch worked, but I'd kind of like beat myself up over the fact that I should have done this 20-mile run, and I'd precious Fridays, I'd booked them all off to the end of the year, and I felt like I'd wasted it. But then I could go and do 16 miles like with some friends, like a trail run, and there would be no pressure at all. Like it's like I'd built up this thing in my head and put this this pressure on myself to make something of this Friday because it had to count, because it was this day that I booked off and everything. So I think sometimes you can talk yourself into a bad run as well, can't you? So what should be a good run, you can talk yourself into a bad one.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy called David Robson who wrote a great book called The Expectation Effect. And one of the things, it's this whole idea of this negative self-perception. You can create injuries through your negative thoughts. He talks about it in the nocebo effect. But it's crazy, what difference is 4 miles going to make in your training? Are you suddenly going to be light years ahead because you've done 4 miles? And it's like I said, when John and I went out, we did that miserable boggy run. We were thinking of doing this big climb. I say big climb, it's about 1,000 foot. And I went, it's not going to make a difference. I'm not suddenly going to become Superman in running because I've bailed out. Yes, it is good to have it in there, but I was unhappy. What can I control? I can just go back to the van, come back and fight another day, and maybe get better stuff or do this. And this is what true. And again, it goes back to the whole thing. What makes ultra runners very resilient peoples? And it's all those features that they have to. It's quite interesting. The spine video, they talk about the need to be adaptable. I think that's the perfect word. I remember watching it going, that's the word. That's how I try to describe it. And adaptability comes through knowledge, experience, and learned collaboration with other people. And, that's it. You know, that's the fundamentals really of resilience. And I think that's one of the things I said. Again, I don't want to take up too much of your time. There's a risk of grit. And this is the big thing with Duckworth. I said I started with Duckworth's grit initial assessment. I've now binned it off. So sorry if people have read Duckworth's grit book and think it's amazing. My conclusion is that it's an absolute load of rubbish. But hey, I'm on a roll for offending people today. We're good. Um, Grit is great in short-term bursts. The grit, in its very simple sense, is passion and perseverance to overcome adversity. So for you, falling and smacking your head and smashing yourself up, you showed grit in completing the challenge. Now, you got grit, but you were lucky that you had a great medical team who gave you the okay to go ahead. Now, it goes back to that idea of stoic machismo. There is a risk, though, that you could be too gritty. And if that medical team was there and you continued, think of the things that you could have potentially put at risk. And it's not just for your own personal self, but it's your family. Mountain rescue, you've got to come out. And I think sometimes people think that grit is what makes a good ultra runner. And grit, you know, sometimes it's good to go, not today. And that's where the resilient nature comes in, which is this, you know, that opportunity to realize that sometimes it's good to fail is actually going, what's more important? What can I control? What can I take sense of? And like I said, grit's good in the short term, but grit isn't going to make you long term successful. There's a lot more things that we need to consider. So
That's interesting how you bring up my fall on the spine, because that was something I was really aware of at the time, is the fact that, you know, I'd phoned my family and spoke to them and said, this is what's happened. I'm waiting now for the all clear. And they were like, don't do anything stupid. And I was like, yeah, I feel good. And I feel like there's no reason why I can't carry on. And that isn't, it's sort of like pig-headedness and thinking I've got to get to the end. Really wanted to get to the end and get it done. I didn't want to go back the following year and do the race. But if I'd have been in, if I was having, you know, signs of concussion and my hip was hurting so much that I couldn't continue, I would have 100% like admitted that to the medical team. I wouldn't have pushed
good.
on, because I, you know, having done the spine races, bits of the races before, you understand, don't you, how the medical team are there for you. They're not going to let you do anything stupid. It's their reputation as well. It's the reputation of the race. Mountain rescue, doing, you know, even like in the summer race when I did Challenger North, when I was like delirious and sort of was on the Cheviots and sort of was wandering here, there, and everywhere and wandered off route, all I wanted to do was lie down and go to sleep. But I knew that that would be an absolute nightmare for the safety team, seeing that I was off route and that I wasn't moving. Even though I was like not really with it, I still had that sort of part of my brain knew that it was a bad idea to sort of be off course and to be asleep or to be not moving for any period of time. I knew that if I got back onto the course and then stopped and there was somebody near me, then I knew that that would be a safer option. So
it, it's interesting though, because throughout all of that, you've raised all of the key pillars straight away. You know, I'm not sure if you were doing it on purpose or anything, but you called your family. So you called your support crew anyway, and that's a good feature. You could have quite easily turned around and said, oh, "I'm going to bloody tell them because I don't want to think I'm a big softy because I've bumped my head." You're open and honest about what happened on. You're open and honest with the other teams. There was a huge amount of self-awareness, and they're the traits that we have to be aware of as resilient individuals. You know, and this is where grit is a potential problem, because sometimes it could be, no, just keep marching on. And that's where big issues come about, is when we try to march on. And sometimes it's good just to sit back and go, yes, of course, you don't want to go back the following year. But very much like me with the white rose, I just kept going back and kept going back and kept going back and not making any real significant progress. I think I got to 87 through luck alone. That for once is a little bit nicer weather. But, you know, if you look at where your successes were, it was, you know, you put all the different features in without realizing it. And this is what makes, you know, highly resilient people in a way they don't know they're massively resilient. but they've learned all these different structures through experience, through wider reading knowledge and collaboration. And
Mm.
it's why it's such an interesting and exciting topic, and it's vast. It's
Mm.
horrifically vast.
Mm. Yeah, so I think that is that's a good way to end the podcast, is with me, you telling me that I am a resilient ultra runner.
You
In
are.
my own strange way.
Yeah, you don't get to Kirk Yetton without being a little bit resilient. I can assure you.
Yeah,
That's
and adaptable. Yeah, adaptability. You're absolutely right about that. That does sum the race up, than to adapt into the many changes that happen during that race. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
quite funny you say that. The final thing you say about adaptability, I've got on my other screen, I've got the thesis I'm writing at the moment. I did this thing where I analysed 250 papers on grit and resilience, made a Venn diagram, and at the centre of it is adaptability. I just spotted it. I was like, oh,
Perfect way to wrap things up. So for people to sort of see your research, what are you doing then? Are you releasing a paper then? Are you?
um, it's going to go through hopefully and a mark for it to be my Viva. Uh, there are a couple of papers coming out from it. Maybe a book
Wow, cool.
if I can be bothered.
Mm.
I'm not sure because I'm also a lot of my work is also on. I'm doing some work on VR and augmented reality and children's creative storytelling. So it's balance things up,
Busy, busy.
and also doing some other work, which yeah, lots of different stuff. So it's just when time comes out, but yeah, I'm more than I am a people want to ask questions or want to have a natter, I'm more than open because it just helps me sometimes to unlock new ideas. So I'm always keen for, or if anyone just fancies a run,
Yeah,
I'm always open.
Mid Wales,
I'm North Wales, but
North Wales. Yeah.
I can travel. I've got a van. Have van, we'll travel.
Yeah, awesome. Right. Well, I'll put all of the all relevant information in the show notes, and I'll make sure that everybody sees your Instagram handle and everything when I tag you for the episode, and people can follow you and get in touch and ask you lots of questions about resilience. So appreciate you coming on, Jules. Thanks for giving us your time, and that, because you don't have a lot of it by all accounts. You're very busy.
You got me on a good night. You got me on a great night. So on a rest night. So thank
Yeah.
God for wet shoes.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam. Much appreciated.
Cheers, mate. Thanks. Bye.